On March the 8th, 2014, a Boeing 777 aircraft carrying 239 people vanished into thin air. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 had departed from Kuala Lumpur just after midnight, bound for Beijing. What began as a routine red-eye flight would soon become one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history, one that continues to baffle experts, torment families, and provoke global speculation more than a decade later. How could a state-of-the-art aircraft disappear without a trace in the era of global tracking, satellites, and round-the-clock surveillance? Despite international investigations, millions of dollars spent on search operations, and fragments of debris found thousands of miles away, we still do not have any definitive answers. This is the Silent Casebook, and in this episode we take a deep dive into the final moments of MH370, the global hunt that followed, the theories, both credible and speculative, the family still searching for the truth, and the most recent developments that could bring long-awaited closure. This is the story of Flight MH370. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 departed Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 12:41 a.m. Malaysia Standard Time on March the 8th, 2014. It was a red-eye flight scheduled to arrive in Beijing at 6:30 a.m. The aircraft, a Boeing 777-200ER, was registered as 9M-MRO and was widely regarded as one of the safest and most technologically advanced commercial aircraft in operation. In command was Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a respected and experienced pilot with over 18,000 flying hours, and First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, who had logged over 2,700 hours. This was Farik's first scheduled flight as a fully qualified co-pilot on a Boeing 777 without a training captain overseeing him. After takeoff, the flight proceeded normally, heading northeast over the South China Sea. At 1:01 a.m., the Aircraft Communication Addressing and Reporting System, or ACARS, sent its final transmission. This system routinely relayed information on the aircraft's engine and the other systems back to the airline. Just before 1:20 a.m., the plane was nearing a waypoint known as eerie, near the boundary between the Malaysian and Vietnamese airspace. Just after 1:19 a.m., air traffic controllers in Kuala Lumpur instructed the pilots to contact Ho Chi Minh Air Traffic Control as they were about to cross into Vietnamese airspace. The final known voice transmission from the cockpit came in response. "Good night, Malaysian 370. This phrase was standard, though slightly informal. It should have been, "Good night, Malaysian 370, using the full call sign. Still, nothing about the tone or content of the message suggested any cause for alarm. Then at 1:21 a.m., just 2 minutes later, the aircraft's transponder was manually disabled, causing it to disappear from civilian radar. Transponders are essential devices that transmit identifying data and altitude to air traffic control systems. Turning it off wouldn't affect the plane's ability to fly, but it would make tracking it much harder. Unknown at the time to civilian authorities, Malaysian military radar continued to detect the aircraft. What they saw defied expectations. Instead of continuing northeast, the aircraft made a sharp left turn, heading west across the Malay Peninsula, flying back over the mainland near the city of Penang. From there, it turned northwest towards the Andaman Sea, eventually reaching the edge of a military radar coverage at approximately 2:22 a.m., about 230 miles northwest of Penang. No emergency signal was sent, no communication from the cockpit followed the course change. To all external observers, the plane had vanished. But it hadn't. What kept the mystery alive, and the search going, was a set of electronic handshakes between the aircraft and a satellite communication system maintained by the British company Inmarsat. The aircraft's satellite data unit, known as the SDU, although not transmitting standard data like ACARS, still made automatic hourly connections with Inmarsat's satellite over the Indian Ocean. These logon requests, known as handshakes or pings, were not designed for location tracking, but became an unexpected lifeline for investigators. There were 7 such pings between 2:25 a.m. and 8:19 a.m., indicating that the aircraft continued to fly for more than 6 hours after it disappeared from radar. The 7th and final handshake occurred at 8:19 a.m., followed by a logon request from the SDU at 8:19:37 a.m., which some experts interpret as a potential sign of fuel exhaustion or power loss, triggering a system reboot. This was the final sign of life from MH370. Based on these pings and detailed analysis of the Doppler shift in the satellite signals, a method used to determine the speed and direction of the aircraft relative to the satellite, investigators concluded that the plane likely crashed somewhere along a remote arc in the southern Indian Ocean, far from its intended path. But in the critical early hours after disappearance, this satellite data had not yet been analysed. Authorities launched search operations in entirely the wrong area, wasting crucial time and resources, while the aircraft's true fate remained unknown. In the hours following MH370's disappearance from civilian radar, confusion and miscommunication defined the initial response. At 1:38 a.m., shortly after the aircraft vanished from radar, Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh Air Traffic Control contacted Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control Center to ask about the plane. It had never made contact after entering Vietnamese airspace. But instead of immediately initiating a rescue response, a series of delays unfolded. Malaysian authorities believed the aircraft was still in Cambodian airspace, based on automated flight tracking data from a third-party service used by Malaysia Airlines. This was incorrect, and no contact had ever been made with Cambodian controllers. The first official search and rescue operation was not initiated until 5:30 a.m., nearly 4 hours after the last radar contact. By then, daylight had already broken over Southeast Asia, and MH370 was nowhere to be found. Initially, the search focused on the South China Sea, near the last known position of the aircraft as reported by civilian radar. Dozens of ships and aircraft from Malaysia, Vietnam, China, and the United States, and other nations joined in a multinational effort. Satellites were examined, and oil slicks were tested for aviation fuel. None yielded results. For nearly a week, the global search effort remained fixated on the wrong ocean. It wasn't until March 14, 2014, 6 days after the disappearance, that Malaysia's Prime Minister Najib Razak publicly announced a major revelation. Military radar and satellite data suggested that MH370 had turned back and travelled westward, eventually heading toward the southern Indian Ocean. This stunning reversal changed everything. Investigators turned to data provided by Inmarsat, which had recorded 7 handshakes with the aircraft. Although the satellite could not pinpoint exact coordinates, the data allowed analysts to define 2 vast corridors, one stretching north towards Central Asia, and another extending south into the Indian Ocean. Known as the Northern Arc and Southern Arc, these zones became the new focus of search efforts. British satellite engineers at Inmarsat and the UK's Air Accident Investigations branch conducted further analysis using the Doppler effect, the shift in frequency caused by the movement of the aircraft relative to the satellite. On March 24, 2014, Prime Minister Najib announced that Inmarsat's analysis confirmed with a high degree of certainty that MH370 had ended its flight in the southern Indian Ocean, west of Perth in Australia. He stated, "We deeply regret that we have to assume beyond any reasonable doubt that MH370 has been lost and none of those on board survived." This declaration marked a turning point. The South China Sea search was suspended. Instead, the focus moved to a remote stretch of the southern Indian Ocean, where the final satellite ping suggested the plane had exhausted its fuel and crashed. The new search zone, though more accurate, presented immense logistical challenges. The area was over 2,000 kilometers from the nearest landmass and subject to harsh weather, strong currents, and deep ocean trenches, some reaching depths of over 6,000 meters. Australia assumed a leading role in coordinating the underwater search, with support from international partners. Advanced sonar equipment, deep-sea drones, and remotely operated vehicles were deployed aboard specialized vehicles like the Go Phoenix. This effort would go on to become the most expensive search operation in aviation history, eventually costing more than $150 million. Despite scanning over 120,000 square kilometers of ocean floor, no wreckage was found in the primary target area during the official search, which lasts until January 2017. But this would not be the end. Debris would soon begin washing ashore thousands of kilometers away, providing new clues and raising new questions about MH370's final resting place. The disappearance of MH370 has sparked an unprecedented array of theories, ranging from grounded technical assessments to baseless conspiracy claims. While the lack of definitive evidence left many questions unanswered, several plausible scenarios have been seriously considered by investigators, aviation experts, and independent analysts. These theories fall into four primary categories. One of the most widely discussed and controversial theories is that the disappearance was the result of intentional human intervention, most likely by the pilot. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a seasoned pilot with over 30 years of experience, came under scrutiny after authorities discovered that he had used a flight simulator at his home to simulate a route eerily similar to the one MH370 is believed to have taken, ending in the remote southern Indian Ocean. The simulated flight occurred several weeks before MH370's disappearance. While this alone was not definitive evidence of wrongdoing, it raised significant concerns. A 2016 unofficial report by New York Magazine cited unnamed US investigators who believed the flight path appeared to be carefully programmed into the aircraft's autopilot system, suggesting premeditation. In 2018, former Australian Transport Safety Bureau Chief Investigator Peter Foley acknowledged that the evidence pointed toward a controlled flight into the water, further fueling suspicions of pilot involvement. However, no clear motive has ever been found. Zahari left no suicide note, and those close to him, including colleagues and family, insisted he showed no signs of distress or instability. The official Malaysian investigation report, released in July 2018, concluded that they could not definitively rule out the possibility of unlawful interference, including by a person in control of the cockpit. Another theory suggests that a catastrophic mechanical failure or onboard fire incapacitated the crew and passengers, leading to the plane flying on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. In this scenario, an electrical fire or technical malfunction could have disabled communication systems, explaining the sudden loss of ACARS and transponder data. The crew may have attempted to return to Kuala Lumpur, explaining the initial westward turn, but were eventually overcome by smoke or hypoxia, leaving the aircraft to continue flying on autopilot until fuel exhaustion. While this theory explains the silence from the cockpit and long flight duration, it struggles to account for the precise maneuvers made early in the diversion, which appear too controlled and deliberate to be attributed to a stricken aircraft operating on autopilot. The hypoxia theory suggests that aircraft suffered a gradual loss of cabin pressure, possibly due to a mechanical fault, causing the crew and passengers to lose consciousness from oxygen deprivation. In this scenario, the aircraft would have continued on autopilot, unresponsive, until fuel exhaustion caused it to crash into the ocean. The idea of a ghost flight has precedent, most notably the 1999 crash of a Learjet carrying golfer Payne Stewart, where hypoxia led to everyone on board becoming unresponsive before the plane eventually ran out of fuel. This theory is supported by the lack of any further communication after 1:19 a.m. and by the aircraft's stable, long-range flight path. However, it doesn't explain the initial series of complex turns the aircraft made shortly after disappearing from radar, maneuvers that almost certainly required manual input from someone in control. In the early days following the disappearance, terrorism and hijacking were high on the list of possibilities. Attention initially turned to two Iranian passengers who had boarded using stolen passports. However, both were later cleared by authorities, neither had any known terrorist links, and they were believed to be seeking asylum. No terrorist group ever credibly claimed responsibility for downing MH370, and investigators found no evidence of sabotage by passengers or crew. Moreover, had the aircraft been hijacked for a political or ideological purpose, it likely would have not ended in the middle of the Indian Ocean without any attempt at communication or landing. One of the more persistent and controversial versions of the hijacking theory suggests that MH370 was taken over and secretly flown to a remote military airbase, such as the US military airbase on Diego Garcia, located in the Indian Ocean. Proponents of this theory point to the aircraft's turn towards the Indian Ocean and the lack of wreckage for years as possible indicators that it landed somewhere intentionally. However, there is no credible evidence suggesting this theory. The US government has repeatedly denied that the plane came anywhere near Diego Garcia, and satellite data strongly indicates that MH370 continued flying until it ran out of fuel and crashed into the southern Indian Ocean. Independent aviation analysts and the official investigation teams have consistently dismissed this theory as unsupported by radar, satellite, or flight path data. In the days following the disappearance of MH370, several relatives of passengers reported that when they tried calling their loved ones' mobile phones, the calls appeared to ring rather than go straight to voicemail. Some claimed that this continued for hours or even days after the plane went missing. These reports attracted intense media attention and fueled speculation that the aircraft might have landed somewhere or remained intact for a period after radar contact was lost. However, subsequent investigations by telecommunications experts concluded that the ringing tones heard by callers are often generated by the network itself, not necessarily by the recipient's phone actively receiving the call. The Malaysian government stated that none of the phones connected to a network and no traceable signal or location data was detected. While the reports remain a poignant and unsettling detail for many families, there is no verifiable evidence that any passenger phones were operational after MH370's final satellite communication at 8:19 a.m. on March 8, 2014. In the absence of hard evidence, MH370 has become fertile ground for conspiracy theories. Some suggest that the plane was shot down by a military missile, while others suggest that it was remotely taken over and diverted. Some of these claims cite supported radar satellite data, but none have been supported by verifiable evidence. The 2018 official Malaysian investigation report stated that there is no evidence to suggest that the aircraft was evading radar or was taken over remotely. While the theory of deliberate action by someone in the cockpit, possibly the captain, remains the most consistent with the known flight path and shutdown of communications, the lack of a flight recorder or cockpit voice recorder means it cannot be confirmed with certainty. As of today, no official conclusion has been declared. The fate of MH370 remains unsolved. Theories continue to circulate, but only the discovery of the main wreckage and the aircraft's black boxes can definitively tell the world what really happened on that night in March 2014. The disappearance of MH370 triggered one of the largest and most complex investigations in aviation history, involving multiple countries, agencies, and independent experts. Despite this massive effort, the outcome has remained frustratingly inconclusive. The primary investigation was led by the Malaysian government, with significant collaboration from the Australian Transport Safety Bureau and the Chinese government, representing the nationalities of most of the passengers. International bodies such as the National Transportation Safety Board in the United States and the UK Air Accidents Investigation Branch and Boeing also participated. From the outset, the investigation focused on two main objectives: determining what happened to the aircraft and why, and locating the wreckage, particularly the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, commonly referred to as the black boxes. While much of the physical aircraft remained missing, the investigation began to yield tangible evidence over a year after the disappearance. On July 29, 2015, a wing component known as a flaperon was discovered on the island of Reunion, a French territory in the western Indian Ocean. French aviation authorities later confirmed that the part belonged to MH370. This was the first physical evidence that the aircraft had indeed ended its flight in the southern Indian Ocean, as predicted by satellite data modeling. This find was significant, not only because it confirmed the plane had crashed, but also because it gave hope that more debris might follow. In the months and years that followed, at least 33 pieces of suspected aircraft debris were found on coastlines in Madagascar, Mozambique, Tanzania, South Africa, and Mauritius. Of these, 3 pieces were positively identified as coming from MH370 by serial numbers or manufacturing tags. These were a section of the right outboard flap, which was found in Tanzania, a segment of the right flap track fairing located in Mozambique, and the original flaperon, which was found on Reunion Island. Other parts, including interior cabin panels, window frames, engine cowling pieces, and parts bearing the Rolls-Royce logo, were strongly suspected to be from MH370, but could not be definitively proven due to a lack of identifying marks. Several of the debris pieces showed signs of erosion consistent with prolonged ocean exposure. Some experts noted manual damage or scorching on interior pieces, although this remains unconfirmed in official reports. After years of investigation, Malaysia released its final report on July 30th, 2018. The report concluded that the aircraft's course change was almost certainly a result of manual inputs, but the investigation team was unable to determine who was responsible or why. The key findings included that there was no evidence of mechanical malfunction or weather-related issues prior to the aircraft's disappearance. The transponder and ACARs were manually switched off or deactivated. The aircraft made a series of deliberate turns, not consistent with an autopilot-only path until much later in the flight. There was no known behavioral or psychological evidence that the pilots were planning an act of sabotage, but pilot suicide could not be ruled out. There was no evidence of involvement from passenger or crew aside from the possibility of someone in the cockpit acting alone. Crucially, the report stated, "The answer can only be conclusive if the wreckage is found and the flight recorders recovered." Despite the size of the aircraft, only a small amount of confirmed debris has ever been recovered. This is partly due to the remote and vast search area, the strong Indian Ocean currents, and coastlines that are poorly monitored or rarely travelled. Ocean drift modelling helped guide search teams to areas where debris was more likely to surface, but even then, recovery was challenging. Many suspect the bulk of the wreckage lies deep in the southern Indian Ocean, on the seafloor up to 6,000 meters deep, far beyond the reach of a casual recovery. In the absence of the black boxes, the investigation ultimately ran up against a wall. The voice recorder and flight data recorder, designed to survive deep-sea crashes, have never been located. Until they are, or the main fuselage is found, the story of MH370 will remain a partial one, with conclusions drawn from inferences, not evidence. The 239 people aboard MH370, there were no goodbyes, only a long, painful silence. As search efforts unfolded and theories multiplied, the families of the passengers and crew were forced into agonizing limbo. No confirmed deaths, no remains to bury, no answers they could hold on to. Of the 239 people on board, 153 were Chinese nationals, 50 were Malaysians, and the others hailed from countries including Australia, Indonesia, France, the United States, and Iran. Among the passengers were business travellers, students, families with children, and crew members who had flown the route countless times. In the days immediately following the disappearance, families gathered at airports, clinging to the hope that their loved ones would somehow be found alive. In Kuala Lumpur and Beijing, makeshift waiting areas turned into vigils. When the news that the aircraft's presumed crash in the Indian Ocean was announced on March 24, 2014, it was delivered via text message to some Chinese families, a move that caused outrage and deepened their grief. For many relatives, the uncertainty was more devastating than the loss itself. Without bodies to bury or wreckage to mourn over, their grief became frozen in time. The lack of definitive closure created a psychological condition known as ambiguous loss, a type of trauma where the mind cannot accept death due to the absence of concrete evidence. Some families have refused to believe the plane had crashed at all. Others clung to the hope that their loved ones were alive, perhaps being held in secret until definitive proof was found. This hope was often reinforced by misinformation and speculative reporting in the media. In the aftermath, many of the next of kin came together to form Voice 370, a group representing the families of those on board. Its mission was clear: to advocate for continued investigation, transparent communication, and government accountability. The group has remained active over the years, holding remembrance events every March, engaging with media, and directly appealing to government and private search firms to resume efforts. In 2014, Malaysia Airlines offered compensation payments of $50,000 to families of each victim. Many accepted these payments under duress, as financial hardship compounded their loss. Some families later filed lawsuits against the airline, Boeing, and other involved parties, citing negligence and demanding full accountability. Legal proceedings have been slow, in part due to jurisdictional complexities and the lack of a final investigation conclusion. In many cases, courts deferred judgments pending new evidence that never came. As of 2024, 10 years since the plane vanished, families continue to seek closure. Some have accepted the likely outcome, others remain skeptical of the official narrative. What unites them all is the need for answers, and the belief that the world has a responsibility to uncover the truth. Remembrance ceremonies held annually across Kuala Lumpur, Beijing, and other cities continue to draw emotional tributes. Empty chairs are arranged, names are read aloud, and photographs of loved ones are displayed, preserving the memory of those aboard MH370 in the absence of their remains. For the families left behind, the plane's disappearance was not just an aviation mystery, it was a wound that never healed. Until the wreckage is found and the final moments understood, they remain in a state of suspended mourning, caught between belief, doubt, and a longing for peace. The disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 exposed vulnerabilities in global aviation that many believed had been resolved decades earlier. In a world where aircraft are tracked in real time, where transponders and communication systems are expected to remain operational, and where international coordination is assumed to be seamless, MH370 proved just how much can still go wrong, and how slowly the world can respond. One of the most significant outcomes was the global aviation industry's reckoning with aircraft tracking systems. Prior to MH370, planes could routinely go untracked for up to 30 minutes over oceans or remote areas. The assumption was that radar and automated reporting systems like ACARS were sufficient. MH370 shattered that assumption. In response, the International Civil Aviation Organization adopted new guidelines. These included mandatory tracking of aircraft every 15 minutes, with even more frequent tracking in distress situations, real-time location reporting for aircraft flying over oceans, and the GADSS initiative, the Global Aeronautical Distress and Safety System, which aims to ensure that no aircraft can disappear without trace. Several airlines also began investing in satellite-based tracking technology independent of radar coverage, allowing for real-time positioning anywhere on Earth. Beyond tracking, MH370 also prompted a reassessment of data recorder accessibility. Proposals were made to make black boxes more ejectable and floatable to increase the chances of recovery in ocean crashes, and stream flight data to satellites in real time during flights. Some of these recommendations have been slow to implement, particularly due to cost and industry resistance. However, the conversation around them remains active because of MH370. Despite technological advancements and procedural reforms, the disappearance of MH370 remains, at its core, a symbol of uncertainty. For many, it represents not just a technical failure, but a failure of human systems, of accountability, transparency, and urgency. It has become one of the most studied aviation mysteries of the 21st century, yet it continues to resist resolution. And perhaps most hauntingly, it showed the world that even in an age of satellite and global communication, a plane can still simply just disappear. From my perspective, this case feels different. It isn't just about aviation, geopolitics, or technology. It's the people, the passengers, the crew whose lives were cut short, and the families left behind to search in the dark. The haunting stillness of MH370's absence is something that still touches us all. It reminds us that even now, in this digital age, some truths remain silent, and that silence is often the hardest part to live with. More than a decade after MH370 vanished, the mystery refuses to rest. For years, families and independent investigators have pleaded for the search to resume, citing improved technology, refined data models, and the belief that the aircraft's final resting place is within reach. In early 2024, those calls began to gain traction once again. In December 2024, the Malaysian government signalled its willingness to relaunch the search for MH370. This renewed effort came in response to a proposal by Ocean Infinity, a marine robotics company based in Texas, which had previously led a private search for the aircraft in 2018. That earlier mission was unsuccessful, but Ocean Infinity believes that advances in underwater scanning technology and refined drift modelling now offer a better chance at success. The new search plan focuses on a 15,000 square kilometre area of the southern Indian Ocean, south of the previously prioritised search zone, based on updated analysis of the Inmarsat satellite data, ocean drift patterns, and debris recovery timelines. Ocean Infinity has committed to conducting the operation under a no-find, no-fee arrangement. If the wreckage is located, the Malaysian government has agreed to pay the company up to $70 million. If nothing is found, no payment will be made. This approach relieves the government of the financial burden and has encouraged support from families and experts alike. Malaysian Ministry of Transport Anthony Loke confirmed in early 2025 that the government would greenlight the mission, emphasizing the enduring importance of finding the aircraft, not only for the families, but for aviation safety worldwide. Since 2018, Ocean Infinity has upgraded its fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles. These AUVs are capable of scanning the ocean floor at extreme depths with high-resolution sonar, operating independently for long periods without human intervention. They will be deployed from Seabed Constructor, a state-of-the-art vessel equipped for deep-sea exploration. In a public statement, Ocean Infinity expressed cautious optimism, stating, "We are more confident than ever with the advances in technology and a refined area of focus. We stand a strong chance of locating the wreckage and providing closure to the families around the world." The announcement of the renewed search brought a wave of emotional responses from the families. For many, the past decade has been marked by frustration, grief, and a relentless push for answers. The idea that someone is still searching, seriously and with a purpose, offers a glimmer of hope. As of March 2025, the renewed search is now underway. The world watches closely as autonomous underwater vehicles scan the ocean floor in one of the most remote regions on Earth. If successful, this mission could finally locate the wreckage, retrieve the black boxes, and bring an end to aviation's most enduring mystery. But if it fails, it may be the last serious attempt in our lifetime. 10 years have passed since Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 vanished from the skies, and in that time, the world has changed. New technologies have emerged, planes are tracked more closely, families have grown older, children have become adults, and the search has gone quiet, only to return again. Yet through all the theories, reports, and fragments of evidence, one truth remains: we still don't know what happened. And that silence, haunting, stubborn, and unresolved, continues to echo across oceans and continents. MH370 is more than a story of aviation failure or investigative complexity. It is a reminder of how fragile certainty can be, that even in an age of hyperconnectivity and constant surveillance, a modern aircraft can still disappear, and that behind every flight number are human lives and broken families still waiting for answers. The search now underway may finally give us what the last decade has not: closure. But if it doesn't, MH370 will continue to stand as one of the greatest and most painful mysteries of our time. If you found this episode compelling, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you never miss an untold story. And if you have your own theories or thoughts on MH370, let us know in the comments below.